What's up, Zach here, and today I have got the all-new Adidas D.O.N Issue 5. A lot more bells and whistles on this one. Also some things that on a lot of shoes look like window dressing on the outside, whereas with these are actually doing something functional, and a lot of inspiration from some other shoes that I kind of seen in this one, just used in different and unique ways. So let's see if they're any good. Let's get into it. Now on the uppers of the D.O.N Issue 5, there are a lot of features and I guess you could say trinkets to look at. I think the most striking thing about the uppers of the 5s is the tongue on them. Now the tongue is a two-piece tongue, which is, you typically either get a slipper tongue or a booty liner, which is a one-piece, or you get a traditional three-piece tongue. Now the D.O.N Issue 5, as well as the Nike Vapor Cage 4, which is a super popular tennis shoe that's been around for a while that they are still making, these are two-piece tongues. Now the difference is, on the D.O.N Issue 5, it opens up laterally. On the Vapor Cage 4, it opens up medially, which I never liked because I feel like when you were pushing off on the Vapor Cage 4, that opening in the tongue medially almost allowed your foot to drive into the shoe. So at least to me, it didn't feel like you were getting a lot of pop right when you were pushing off. Versus on the D.O.Ns, when you're really trying to accelerate or when you're trying to jump or get up into the air, this side is, really locked in on your foot versus on the lateral side, which is a little bit more forgiving. To me, a two-piece tongue is tough to get right in terms of lockdown. However, with the D.O.N Issue 5, because it's all external lace eyelets, you actually can crank down on these pretty darn good. The one thing I will say is the last eyelet here, I mean, although it might be durable enough, it doesn't feel as durable as the rest of the setup. It does make quite the noise when you're cranking the laces. The other thing is you do get a quasi runner's knot, which is the same as the Nike Vapor 11, also in the tennis space. Whereas on the medial side of the shoe, you just get a traditional external eyelet. On the lateral side, you get this reinforced runner's knot, which means you take the lace through there and you basically just do a Canadian lace, which is you just loop the lace back in there and then tie it with the lateral side. I found when I was tying these up, I wanted to tighten everything up first and then I would loop that through and then pull, because it's really hard to get it tight if it's already laced through there. So at least give yourself some slack there to tighten up, and then it almost locks it in. So you do get a very nice lockdown. Heel slippage was just about 0 on these. Number one, they also have this tab over there like a lot of Adidas shoes do. It's a little bit more kind of pushed toward the back of your Achilles to keep you in. And like I said, the tongue doesn't have a gusset on the lateral side, but it is banded down there. And on the medial side, it does lock in. The nice thing I found about this is you can almost tuck the tongue in around the lateral side of your foot and then lock it down, so it does give you a little bit more of a snug fit on foot. Now, if you look at the upper durability test on these 10-second tie grit sandpaper, the burr does start to rip right through the uppers down into the underside of that. So if you are an extreme dragger slider on an outdoor court, get ready for these to start looking a little rough, but on an indoor court, I think they'll be a lot better. Now, for sure, I will talk about the foxing elements, so the 3 stripes on the medial and lateral side. I'll get into that in the midsole teardown, because that has a lot to do with the midsole. But if you look at the breathability of the D.O.N Issue 5s, even more bizarre, I would say. They only heated up 111.1 degrees, cooled down another 40.2 degrees, which is pretty standard. However, if you look at the breathability mapping of the D.O.N Issue 5, there was no fog coming out of this thing whatsoever until a while later, where it started to come out at the base of the tongue. Now that is good in terms of it, like I said, wrapping around your ankle and giving you good lockdown, but these are going to hold on to a little bit more heat and moisture, just because, like I said, they are so intimately contacting your foot. When it's just a heat gun in there and there's room for that air to get out of there, the materials are mesh in there. There's paneling for sure, but most of the uppers are mesh. So that's gonna be better. But when it's locked around your foot, I think on hot days, you might get some trapping. So I would say on a really hot, humid day outside, maybe bring a separate pair of socks or just a thinner pair of socks. That way you can get a little bit more air exchange throughout the shoe. But getting into the midsole teardown, once again, the light strike compounds just continue to befuddle me. This light strike, it's a whole bed of light strike on these, but it definitely feels a little bit more dense than some other light strike products. I looked everywhere, it said light strike under there, and I believe them. There's also a ridiculously thick shank on these. It is super strong under there, which is nice because usually light strike, yes, very bottom light, but it can start to bottom out. No pun intended, I guess a lot of pun intended. With that shank in there though, how thick it is, how strong it is, and top loaded, it is going to load share with that light strike foam really nicely. The thing that I found really cool about the midsole foam setup is that the strobel board is ridiculously thick with foam as well over top of it, so it's not uncomfortable. The one thing I noticed is with the midsole on the 5s, it is not super plush. It is definitely a more springy feeling underfoot. It's light, like light strike usually feels. It's light underfoot, and it's very, kind of lively, but it is not plush. That does bring me to today's sponsor though, which is Power Steps, and specifically for this shoe, the Bridge orthotics, which are an orthotic that really adds a lot of plushness to the shoe. And with this little exoskeleton, is plushness a word? But anyway, with this exoskeleton on it, it maintains the shape of the orthotic. I've actually had this particular pair. Yes, this is worn, you can see. I've had this pair for a while, and I'm a heavier dude, and this exoskeleton on the bridges has still really not faltered whatsoever, which is great. And the foam on it is still ridiculously plush, as well as it's pretty resilient underfoot. It really feels like you're getting a little bit of almost like a memory foam mattress with a little bit of a kick to it. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's really what the bridges feel like. They're not the Pinnacle or the Pinnacle Max, which is the really super broad, stout arch support. This is more of a medium support orthotic with a lot more of a plush feel underfoot. So if you're wearing something like the D.O.N Issue 5, which is, yes, bottom light and incredibly stable of a shoe, and specifically in the D.O.N Issue 5, where I was talking about the 3 stripes, where you can see the molding on the outside of the midsole. And the outside of that midsole, a lot of times when you see molding on it, it has no translation on the inside of the shoe. Whereas in the D.O.N Issue 5s, you can see on the medial side with that really nice arch buildup, you can feel it on the inside of the shoe. So in something like the D.O.N Issue 5, the bridges are such a perfect pickup, because you can kind of use some of the arch support of the D.O.N Issue 5 plus something ultra plush and comfortable like the Bridge orthotics with that exoskeleton, and all of a sudden you've got the best of both worlds. With stiff shoes or shoes like the D.O.N Issue 5, which, yeah, they're springy, but they're not super plush, the Bridge orthotics are just a perfect addition. So thank you to Power Step for sponsoring this video. I'll leave a link in the description to these below, and let's get into the bounce height test, which, as you can see, usually with light strike foam, you're not going to get anything crazy. I got 27.5 centimeters in the rear foot and then 31 in the forefoot, and that's pretty typical. The higher stack of light strike usually does not equate to any more bounce on that. The one thing about the D.O.N Issues is because the shank is so stiff, because the setup is just so molded around your foot, it's more of the launch action of the D.O.N Issues, right? Like if you can see me trying to bend these things, they don't want to bend very much, and that usually translates to when you're putting a lot of force into it, right? When you're putting body weight down and that shank loads all that energy, it's going to want to spring you forward. That's where these get their giddy up, right? Not necessarily from the midsole foam. The midsole foam is basically, I think, just to make the shoe lighter, in my opinion. The outsole tread of the D.O.N Issue 5s is really something wild. I know it doesn't look like anything wild. It's an entire bed of herringbone, and then some radial patterns here under the central heel, then medial and lateral forefoot. You're going to be pivoting a lot. However, it's the compound of the rubber that is insane. It really actually felt sticky on the court when I first took them out and I had it on my foot. You can hear it on the video I took just trying to get it up off the court. On the grip test ramp, yes, weighted and unweighted, it didn't start to budge until 49 degrees. Now that's compared to something like the Anti-Shockwave 5, and I think it was either 35 or 36 degrees, and then LeBron 4, which I think was 25 degrees. So you can see these are incredibly sticky when they get out of the box. They do go through a little bit of a graining phase and a little bit of a dusting phase, because once I started to get dust on them, I definitely could feel my lead foot starting to kind of come out from underneath me just a little bit when I was trying to put on the brakes. And then after that graining phase, and I could get some heat into them again, and like I said, that kind of translates into just breaking the rubber in. They are going to start gripping again very good. I would just say out of the box, you're going to get insane grip, and then it's going to go away for a little bit, and then I think, heat up the rubber, it'll be fine, or once they break in, they should be okay. Now, if you look at these on the speed ratio, they only come in at a 1.96. That is, I think, just a problem with, the speed ratio. It doesn't take into account sometimes the energy that the shank can load. I think that's a little bit misleading. I will say, though, once the light strike starts to bottom on these, once you start to lose a little bit of the resilience in the light strike foam, I think that speed ratio is going to be more and more accurate over the lifetime of the shoe. Yes, the shank is going to last for a while, but I think over the life of the shoe, that light strike might break down a little bit. Now, if you've got an orthotic in them, for sure, you're going to load share with that light strike better, and the shoe is going to last longer, and they're going to be speedier, and they're going to be more efficient for longer. So I think that's kind of, I think the main point of the speed ratio on these is that if you take care of your midsole foam, right, you shield it maybe with an orthotic or something, you're going to get a lot more use out of these in the long run for sure. Now, if you look at this on the outsole durability test though, 10 seconds, highest grit sandpaper, not a millimeter of damage on these, almost a millimeter. The durometer only came in at a 16, which to me is surprising. A lot of Adidas shoes come in getting into the 20s. This one was a little bit lower, but the burr still did not rip through it. Now this is a little bit of a thinner herringbone pattern. Those radial patterns are a little bit more narrow. So once, if you are on a gritty outdoor court and you start to rub this tread raw, it is gonna start to meld into each other after a while. So I would watch out for that. So I'd say best surface for this, I think, is still an indoor hardwood court, rubberized court, even carpet's fine. I think these are fine for outdoor courts. It's just that once you start getting into the later life of this shoe, we'll probably start to notice some of these radial patterns start to meld into each other. You'll probably start to lose a little bit of that really fine tactile grip into them. But in terms of a shoe for both indoor and outdoor use, I still think it's fine. Now the fit of the D.O.N Issue 5s, like a lot of other Adidas shoes, I actually am measuring the exact lengths and widths of all the shoes now. That is in the Basketball Shoe Buyer's Guide, which is the Google Sheet available for purchase in the description below. You can kind of sort all shoes by their length and width now, their exact lengths and width, which is really nice to do, especially for me doing all these reviews. But anyway, besides that shameless plug, I'd say narrow and medium foot can just go true to size on these. If you are a 2E foot, I think you're still okay going at true to size. I was fine true to size on these, zero cramping whatsoever. There's just enough give with this to expand. I'd say if you are a 4E, I think probably going up a half size is probably good. The only bad thing is going up a full size on these, I think with the two-piece tongue, might start to feel a little bit weird for you if you are a 4E going up one full size on these. So take with that what you will. Now for the snake bitten foot, I really do think an orthotic in these is probably the way to go. If you have arch pain or arch strain, I think this is maybe one of the shoes of the year for that because of all the molding, because of how stout the molding is on the midsole, plus coming up into the uppers. So especially with an orthotic, I think these are great for that. And for ball of foot pain, heel pain, Achilles pain, I think an orthotic is really going to help out with these. And the nice thing is they lock down really well, especially for a lower profile orthotic in there. So I think as long as you're doing that, I think you're okay. They're not bad. They're just not the most forgiving things out there for those, except like I said, for arch pain, arch strain, which I think they're fantastic. And getting into the performance of the 5s, it was a real Jekyll and Hyde type shoe. I felt quick in them. They were giving me a lot of snap, which was nice. They also felt very stiff. The break-in of them, there's really no break-in in terms of comfort in the uppers. They felt good from the jump. It's just that bending them is hard at first, right? Like actually running in them, it feels like you're running on a diving board, which like I said is great for launch, but you are gonna wanna play with them an hour or two before I think you really have to play hard in them just to kind of get them into that more mellow zone. I also just didn't find that, like I said, that the foam was super responsive and bouncy. I felt that, yes, they were springy and springboard-like feeling, but they weren't like bouncy, almost like, you know, they weren't a Peba type foam, right? They weren't boom foam or anything like that. They didn't feel like the AG4. But for what they are, a very bottom-like shoe that grips incredibly well, incredibly stable shoe for how streamlined it is, incredibly efficient shoe, and a very nimble shoe at that. So I think you're someone like, you know, Donovan Mitchell, you know, who's got all the footwork he could ever need. This is a great shoe for him, for sure, just because, like I said, it is so agile of a shoe. And like I said, it does give a nice little springboard, especially if you're running around the three-point line trying to get up over somebody else to hit a jump shot. The springboard effect in this shoe, especially when new, is going to be very nice. And the lockdown on these is very confidence-inducing in these shoes. I really had no feelings of any instability inside of them, even though, like I said, they're not, you know, they're not a boat of a shoe, right? They're not super clunky either. So a really maximalist feeling protective shoe in the uppers that doesn't have a super maximalist clunky feel to them. That's kind of what you're gonna get from these. I think, like I said, if you want the plush feeling under there, throw an orthotic when you're playing in them, and I think you'll get more close to the best of both worlds of the shoe. It's one of those shoes that's pretty good at just about everything, and just about any type of player can wear them. And I like those shoes because it's just nice to have a shoe to recommend to just about anybody. That's kind of what these are. It's a really nice workhorse type shoe. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the D.O.N Issue 5. Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you want to see another Adidas shoe that has all sorts of bells and whistles on it, the Adidas Trae Young 3 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in Sneakerverse.